Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Katie Julian. I am a member of our taxpayer education team here at the Tennessee Department of Revenue. Joined today for this workshop by Billy Trout, who is my boss and the manager of our taxpayer education team,
Good
as
morning.
well as, hey, Billy.
Hello.
Joined also by Mitch Gibson, who is manager of our call center. Good morning, Mitch. Billy and Mitch and I will be presenting topics to you today. Also joining us, Stephanie Bailey, who's also a member of our taxpayer education team, and Mr. Dan Vinson, our assistant director at Taxpayer Services here with the Department of Revenue. Good morning,
Good morning,
everyone.
everyone.
Hey.
Yeah, good morning.
So on behalf of our commissioner, David Giragano, we just want to welcome you here today to our new business workshop. We're glad you can join us. Just a few housekeeping items I want to go over before we get going here. If you're having audio issues, then you can't hear me right now, but if you were to experience some later on through the workshop, the information you see on the screen right here, we've learned that one of the best things to do is to leave the event and then come back in. We do have a participant guide today. I've got a link to the participant guide up in the chat. If you want to scroll up through the chat, there's a couple links there that'll take you over to a participant guide. We will also be putting a recording of today's workshop on our website tomorrow. So if you want to come back and reference it later, you'll be there. We will be taking, this is a pretty long workshop this morning, about 3 hours. So we're going to take a short 10-minute break around 9:45 or when there's a natural break in the topics that we're going over. So give you a chance there. We will, let's move forward here. Go over real quick what we're going to be covering today. So joining us, I'm sure we've got some people here that are business owners, that are new business owners. Maybe you've been in business for a while and just want to make sure you're dotting all your I's and crossing your T's. Maybe learn a few things that you weren't sure about or confused about. You may be a person thinking about starting a new business. If so, some of this may be a little bit overwhelming, but our goal is to take some of the guesswork out of this confusing tax stuff. If you're a business owner, you've got enough other stuff that you're worried about, marketing, customers, making money. This is the tax stuff we really, it's just a necessary evil, right? We've all got to deal with it. And in Tennessee, a big part of that falls onto business owners to take care of. And we just want to make it as easy for you as possible. It's a win-win for us here at the Department of Revenue and for you as a business owner, for you to understand what it's all about. We're going to be going over some preliminary steps and some basics of where to go for what. And then we're going to be talking about some basic state tax accounts, going over tax law, registering, filing, how to close an account. We're not going to go into all the different tax types that we have, but we're going to be talking about the basic tax types that apply to most businesses here in Tennessee. Very importantly, we're going to be going over some resources, how to get help, where to find information on our website. We've got wonderful resources on the web. We've got a very brand new web resource that just launched last week that we are excited to share with you. And I say that with all sincerity. We're really excited about some new resources we have for new businesses that we've put on our website, and we'll be going over that as well. So first here, we're going to talk about where to start. Your entity type. It's very important that you do register with all the different agencies that you're going to be dealing with as a new business, such as the IRS, with us here at Revenue, maybe the Secretary of State, Department of Labor, if you've got employees, getting your license at the city or county clerks. It's very important that you use the same entity type and entity ID number. So entity types are sole proprietor, marital joint, general partnerships, corporations, LLCs, things like that. Different when it comes to registering your Tennessee state tax accounts. We've got a little chart here on this slide that you can see. Sole proprietorships are always going to register with us with their social security number. Now, if you're a sole proprietorship and you have employees, you may have an EIN, that you got from the IRS. But it's real important that if you're a sole proprietor that you do register with the Tennessee Department of Revenue using that Social Security number. If you're a marital joint account, you're going to use both Social Security numbers. For general partnerships, corporations, LLCs, trusts, you're going to register with us using the EIN. For single member LLCs, however, you can use either a social or an EIN. It's a lot easier if you set up your Tennessee state tax accounts using an EIN. It's kind of a cleaner way to get access to your accounts on TNTAP. We'll go into that a little bit later. But this little chart will just tell you exactly how which ID type you'll need to register for these tax accounts in Tennessee. Where to go? Whew, this list. There's a lot to consider here if you're a new business. For your business license, which is going to be required for all in-state businesses with a physical location. Some out-of-state businesses, like contractors that are out-of-state, are going to need a business license as well. Other out-of-state businesses won't need one, a business license that is. But where you go for that is the city or county clerk's office. Most counties and cities have the availability to get that, to apply for that license on their websites, but you can always go to the city or county office. If you are chartering or registering your business in Tennessee, you'll go to the Tennessee Secretary of State. That is for partnerships, corporations, LLCs, business trusts. If you are a sole proprietorship, you can ignore this step right here. So, of course, for your FEIN or Federal Employee Identification Number, you're going to go to the IRS. You can do that online as well. And that's going to be required, again, as we mentioned on the previous slide. You'll need that EIN to register with us if you're a partnership, corporation, LLC, business trust. If you do have employees, no matter what type of entity you are, you're going to need that for the Department of Labor to get unemployment insurance. I'm sorry. If you have employees or payroll, you'll need to go to the Tennessee Department of Labor and Workforce Development, and they've got a great website as well. Some professions in Tennessee do require a professional license. For that professional license, you're going to go to the Tennessee Department of Commerce and Insurance, contractors, cosmetologists, insurance agents, etc. Department of Commerce has a great website, and I believe that you can apply for your license online as well there. And of course, here at the bottom, for all tax accounts, in Tennessee, you are going to register with the Tennessee Department of Revenue. And there are just a very few exceptions to that. But if you're a business here in Tennessee, you're going to be registering with us. I say they're tax accounts, Tennessee Department of Revenue, but keep in mind that unemployment tax is handled through the Tennessee Department of Payroll Tax, also known as payroll tax. That's handled through Department of Labor, not through us. So just a brief little overview here of state revenue in Tennessee. You can see this pie chart here. These numbers are from fiscal year 2021. We should be coming up with the new numbers pretty soon. But you can see here the vast majority of revenue in Tennessee comes from sales and use tax. It's about 60%. The little dollar infographic there that you see, about 56 cents out of every dollar from sales tax goes into education. The rest goes to local governments and the state general fund. Thing about sales tax, if you live here in Tennessee, whether you're a business owner or not, you're going to be paying it, right? Just about everything you buy, on most things you buy. But the businesses are the ones who collect that sales tax and then remit it. You're just holding on to it for us and then remitting it over to us. But it's a pretty big responsibility. You can see there that F&E, franchise and excise tax, is about 21%. Another major tax that is going to affect you if you're a business owner is business tax. But look at that. It's just a tiny little piece of the pie, 1% there. But it's a very important part of local revenues. A lot of the business tax revenues get allocated back to the municipalities and the counties here in Tennessee. So this is to give you an idea of what we're going to be going over today, the common types of state tax accounts. We're going to be talking today mainly about business tax, sales tax, a little bit of F&E. There are some other tax accounts that will affect some of you, like liquor by the drink, tire tax, tobacco taxes, but mainly business tax, sales tax, and F&E are the tax accounts that affect most businesses here in Tennessee. Business tax is applicable if you conduct business within any county and or incorporated municipality or city in Tennessee, city or town. And there are some exceptions, but all businesses that sell goods or services must pay the state business tax. Sales tax, it applies to the retail sale of tangible personal property. You'll hear us referring to that today as TPP. And some services. The seller or the business is liable for the tax whether it's collected or not. So it's really important that you understand the sales tax aspect if you are a business or retailer and what is subject to that sales tax so that you can make sure that you comply with that. Franchise and excise tax is applicable for any corporation, limited partnership, limited liability company, or business trust that is chartered or registered through the Tennessee Secretary of State to do business here in Tennessee. So we are going to now, I'm going to hand the reins over to Mitch, our call center manager, who is going to go over business tax with you. Let's see here, Mitch. Let me change your role to the presenter here.
Thanks,
And
Katie.
there you go. Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, hello, everyone. Very excited to be here with you this morning. As Katie said, my name is Mitch Gibson. I am a manager within Taxpayer Services for the Tennessee Department of Revenue. This morning, we're going to go over business tax specifically. We get a lot of questions pertaining to business tax, so hopefully the information that you find in this presentation will be helpful for you. Just to go over a brief overview of what we're going to cover. So we're going to be defining a lot of words. If you'll notice, there's a couple of words that are underlined on this slide. We're going to be going into detail as to what each of these words mean. Okay, so first we're going to be talking about the business tax and how it's defined. Okay, so what requires a business to have business tax? Generally speaking, it's going to be gross receipts of sales and services. There's also going to be the concept of the tax rate. I'm so sorry. Sorry, guys. I'm actually having an issue. Sorry, I'm running into some technical issues. Hold on just a second.
Are you trying to click through the PowerPoint, Mitch?
No, for some reason my screen is freezing. Hold on just a second.
Yeah, you froze up for just a second there, but I can hear you now and I can see you. But for there was, it seemed like there was a slight little glitch for just a second.
I think there's some Wi-Fi issues. Sorry, guys. If that happens, I'll try to bounce back. That's part of the aspect of doing these things virtual. You just have to kind of navigate through some of these technical difficulties. However, if I do experience any issues, then I'm sure Katie can jump back in and relieve. So as I was talking about with business tax, generally what defines business tax is going to be the gross receipts of sales and services. Okay, there's going to be a couple of tax rates that are defined by the classification of a business license. There's also the concept of a retailer versus wholesaler. Okay, so these things are going to define the tax rate that a business may pay when they file their business tax. There's a couple of deductions and credits available that can offset tax liability. So we'll go into a couple of those deductions and credits as well. We're also going to be talking about the registration process. Required for all entities with a standard business license, you have to register. Some businesses will register directly with the Department of Revenue. Other businesses will register with the clerk's office where they actually get that business license. Also required are out-of-state businesses that have a nexus in Tennessee. So we'll go into a little bit of the registration process there. And of course, some entities and services are exempt. So we're going to be going into those types of entities. We're also going to be talking about the filing frequency. So generally speaking, with business tax is always going to be due on the 15th day of the 4th month following the fiscal year end. Okay, so the overwhelming majority of our taxpayers, they have a December fiscal year end. So that means that their due date is always going to fall on April 15th. However, if you, as a business, as a taxpayer, have a different fiscal year end from December, then you can just calculate what your due date is going to be by going to the 15th day of the 4th month after the end of that fiscal year end, and that's going to be your due date. Also, any filing requirements, there's always a minimum tax due of $22 per license per location every year. That's even if you file a $0 return with the Department of Revenue, that minimum tax will be due, so we'll go over that. We're also going to be going over the business license expiration date as well. Business licenses, they expire the 1 month after the due date of the tax, and we'll go into a little bit about that as well. Now, since we're talking about business tax specifically, as you know, we have a chat feature. Go ahead and if you have any questions pertaining to business tax, we have a team that's going to be trying to answer any and all questions that you may have. And so don't be scared to ask any questions in that chat feature. All right, so business tax licensing overview. As we had mentioned prior, this concept of gross sales is a very important aspect of business tax. It is generally the primary determining factor that determines whether a business actually needs to get a license. As you can see from this visual, businesses that generate gross sales of less than $3,000 a year, there is no business license requirement for these businesses. This is generally understood as being more of a hobby. And so businesses that generate less than 3,000, there is no licensing requirement. If you notice, there's also no filing requirement. So since there's no license, there's no filing requirement for businesses that generate less than $3,000 a year. And since there is no license, there's also no renewal process. Businesses that fall between the sales threshold of 3,000 and 10,000, this is going to be called a minimal activity business license. Okay, this is a little different than the license that's right above that one, which is a standard. The minimal activity license does not have a tax filing requirement. There is a renewal process, but that renewal process only happens through the clerk. It does not happen with us, the Tennessee Department of Revenue. The business license that we, the Department of Revenue, deal with is going to be any licenses, any businesses that generate more than 10,000. That's where they are required to get a standard business license. And as you notice, any businesses that have a standard business license, there is a filing requirement. And you would file that return annually through the TIMTAP portal. And once that return has been filed and that tax has been paid, then the clerk will be notified and they will issue you a brand new license. Now, there are a couple of special rules for contractors and out-of-state businesses. We'll get on this a little later. So we get a lot of questions about the general process of how to get your business license. As we mentioned, minimal activity licenses, there's no filing requirement. And so to get a new minimal activity license, you just have to go to the clerk and pay them $15 every single year. And that is how you renew your minimal activity license. This graphic on this slideshow, this is specifically pertaining to the standard business license process, okay? So if you get a standard business license, that means you gross more than $10,000 a year. And so you need to make that determination. Do you plan on grossing $10,000 a year? Sometimes we'll get businesses that say, hey, I don't know if I'm gonna gross 10,000 now, but I may gross 10,000 in the future and I plan to hit that threshold. It may benefit you to just go ahead and get a standard just so you don't have to worry about it. And so we really encourage taxpayers to make those determinations themselves because they're the ones who know their business. But what does this process look like? So you, the business, you determine your sales threshold. Let's say you determine that you gross 10,000 or more. You apply for the license directly with the clerk. Okay. When you apply for that business license, the clerk imports that data to us, the Tennessee Department of Revenue. Okay. When it comes time for you to file and report the sales that you had from the previous year, after you file that return and pay the tax to us, the Tennessee Department of Revenue, our system communicates that information directly to the clerk. Okay. And then once they have received notification that you have satisfied your business tax filing requirement and paid all tax liabilities, they then issue that license to the business for the new year. And this process happens every single year while the business is active. So that's the general process as to how you obtain your business license and renew every single year. Now, the concept of wholesaler versus retailer, that's an important aspect when filing your business tax return. The reason why is because this informs the tax rate on the business tax return. Okay, so if you are a wholesaler, that means that you generate 50% or more of your taxable gross sales to maybe the sale to a retailer for resale, a sale of materials that become part of a product that is for resale, or a sale of goods to the government or a governmental agency or to a nonprofit. And so you really need to determine, whether your sales would fall under that wholesale description or that category. If they do not, then you would fall into the retailer category. Okay. So if at least 50% of your taxable gross sales are retail sales, then you would be considered a retailer. And again, the difference between these two, they do have different tax rates, which we're going to get into a little later during this presentation, and I'll show you why it's very important to choose the correct one when you're filing that return.
Hey, Mitch, one thing I want to note on retailer versus wholesaler, this is not a determination that a business needs to make in the beginning when they're getting their license.
Right.
This is a question when you go to file your return, you will choose whether you're a retailer or a wholesaler. So, because you may not know till the end of the year, until you've got all of your sales, till you're looking at everything, whether you're a retailer or wholesaler, right? A lot of people might just go ahead and assume they're a retailer or know they're a
Correct.
wholesaler, but that's again something that you don't need to know when you're registering and when you're getting that license.
Correct. Awesome. Yeah, that's a great point, Katie. I really appreciate you adding that. Yeah, you don't have to dictate whether you're a wholesaler or retailer when you're first establishing your business, but you do need to know that when it comes time for you to file your return. Also, at the beginning of 2023, Public Chapter 2204, there's this new process dealing with wholesale retail certificates. We'll add a little bit of information pertaining to this in the chat, but if you're following along with the guide, there should be a link there that you can click on. There's some information pertaining to this. This is going to ideally deal more with wholesalers, but this process is basically designed to help businesses define exactly what they are and prove that their sales are derived from wholesale sales compared to retail sales. And so we would recommend you check that link out in the chat and just read up on that. Again, that's not going to take effect until 2023. Moving on. So again, we're going to define a couple of things. We get a lot of questions about what gross sales means exactly. We get some businesses that are service businesses and they say, I don't sell anything. Well, technically you do, you sell your services. And so gross sales are, in the simplistic term, they are defined as all sales derived from products and services. Okay, so any sales along with any exemptions or deductions, they must be reported by location on the tax return. So we're really looking for that subtotal amount. And so we ask that, businesses, when they're filing their return, what are the total gross receipts that business generated? Now, not all of those sales may be taxable. Maybe they need to be exempted out in the return. But on that line 1, gross sales, we want to include all sales that have been derived from products or services. Who is subject to business tax? This is another big question that we get. Generally speaking, Tennessee retailers are going to be subject to the business tax. And again, talks a little bit about those sales thresholds that we talked about. So Tennessee retailers with $10,000 or more in any county, they're going to be subject to business tax. Tennessee retailers with 10,000 or more in a municipality or city jurisdiction, they're going to be subject to business tax. Out-of-state retailers with 10,000 or more in Tennessee or with Nexus. Now, again, we'll define what Nexus is a little later in the presentation, but they are going to be subject to business tax. Out-of-state retailers are not subject to the city business tax, okay? Tennessee contractors, there's some special rates that apply to Tennessee contractors, but generally speaking, Tennessee contractors, so in-state contractors with 10,000 or more gross sales in their domiciled county, they're going to be subject to business tax, or $50,000 that's generated in any other county in the state. They're going to be liable for business tax within that county. And as far as city is concerned, Tennessee contractors with 10,000 or more in a city or 50,000 in any other city, then they would be liable for that business tax as well. Out-of-state contractors with 10,000 or more in any county, they're going to be subject to business tax. And then out-of-state contractors with 50,000 or more within a city jurisdiction, they're going to be liable for that business tax. We've got some really helpful information on our website specific to contractors, whether they're in-state and out-of-state, that fleshes this information out in a pretty good organized way. And so I would recommend using this presentation as well as the resources that we have on our website in determining whether or not business tax, you're going to be subject to business tax in certain jurisdictions if you are a contractor. So again, as I said, we want to define the term nexus. So out-of-state entities are subject to the business tax if they have nexus in Tennessee. So what is nexus? Nexus generally is understood as any business that's organized or commercially domiciled in Tennessee, that can generate nexus or create nexus. If a business owns or uses capital in Tennessee, that may create nexus. A Brightline presence is established. What is a Brightline presence? Generally speaking, a Brightline presence is if receipts are more than $500,000 in Tennessee, or 25% of total receipts reside in Tennessee. If property is used in Tennessee, more than 50,000, or 25% of total property by value is in Tennessee. Also, payroll can be something that generates nexus as well. If more than $50,000 of payroll is in Tennessee, or 25% of compensation is paid in Tennessee. And then, of course, out-of-state entities with $10,000 or more in sales or that have nexus, they register directly with the state. And so it's a combination of sales threshold and whether or not nexus is created. That dictates whether or not a business is subject to the business tax.
Hey, Mitch,
Yeah.
before you move on to the next slide regarding Nexus, we just had a tax webinar just last week, actually, specifically dedicated to the topic of Nexus for out-of-state businesses. So Nexus with regards to business tax, sales tax, and F&E tax. So for any of you that may be located out of state, and if that applies to you, you can view last week's webinar on out-of-state Nexus. You can view the recording of that and look at the materials from that on our website. You go to tn.gov/revenue and click on taxpayer education, similar to where you registered for this workshop. And then you click on tax webinars, and we've got a webinar video archive there. So there's a specific drop down just for out-of-state businesses if you want more information and more detailed information on Nexus.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. And we can also put in the chat a link to maybe that webinar, if possible. The webinars are very, very helpful. It's very easy to navigate on our website, and so that's a very good point that webinar went very well over Nexus. And so if you have any additional questions to that, then you can use that resource as well. Classifications. So similarly to the wholesale and retail aspect that we were talking about earlier, wholesale retail, that can determine the tax rate that is used when filing your return. Classifications is another very important feature on the sales tax return, or I mean on the business tax return. As the classification, it informs the tax rate that is used on the return as well. So what is a classification? So each taxpayer is classified by its dominant business activity on a per location basis. Okay, so what is the dominant business activity? Generally speaking, it's defined as the business activity that is the major or principal source of taxable gross sales. So what generates 51% of your revenue, of your gross sales? Whatever that business activity is, that is going to be the dominant business activity, and that is what you need to use when making a selection as to the classification that your business tax is going to be at. In other words, the business classification is based on the activity that generates the largest portion of the business's taxable sales. We've got as mentioned earlier, there's different tax rates depending on the classification. But as mentioned earlier, there's different tax rates depending on whether you're a retailer or wholesaler. Okay, so just as an example, you have a class 2 here. A class 2 retailer is 0.0015. And so when it comes time to file that business tax return for a class 2, they're going to multiply their gross sales by this 0.0015. And that's going to be the amount of business tax that they owe to renew that business license. However, if they're a wholesaler, they have an entirely different rate. Okay, so as Katie was explaining earlier, you don't have to know whether you're a wholesaler or retailer when you first start your business, but you have to know when you file that return. Okay, because that will inform the tax rate that you pay on your return. And so here's a list of the different classifications that we have in the state of Tennessee. So we have class 1, and then we also have 5 subcategories for class 1. We also have class 2, 3, 4, and then we have 2 subcategories for class 5. All right. This information is also listed on our website as well, and it breaks it down in a pretty organized way. So to break down each classification, as mentioned earlier, the class 1 has 5 subcategories. So you have class 1A. These are any businesses that are engaged in the sale of food and beer for home preparation or consumption, and food brokerage services. So think of maybe grocery stores, things like that. Class 1B, these are for businesses that are engaged in the sales of lumber, building materials, tools, builders hardware, farm equipment, plumbing, heating, air conditioning equipment, and other types of hardware. You also have class 1C. These are for businesses that are engaged in the sale of hay, grain, feed, fertilizer, seeds, bulbs, nursery stock, other farm, lawn, and garden supplies. Class 1D, this is for any businesses that are engaged in the sale of gasoline, diesel fuel, or motor oils at retail. So think of a gas station. And then, of course, you have class 1E, which is businesses engaged in the sale of gasoline and diesel fuel at the wholesale level. Moving on to class 2. Class 2 is, we sort of coined that classification as the catch-all classification. So if you notice down here, this class includes a catch-all for the sale of any tangible personal property that is not specifically classified elsewhere. So if you noticed, there was tangible personal property that was listed under the subcategories for class 1. However, unless a tangible personal property is listed elsewhere under another classification, then by default, it's probably going to fall under the catch-all, which is class 2. All right, so here is a couple of examples, but a good rule of thumb is if you can't find the tangible personal property that you are engaged in selling listed under any of the other classifications, then by default, it's probably gonna fall under a class 2. That's a general good rule of thumb. Class 3 is this is for your service businesses. Okay. Now, as mentioned earlier, there's a couple of tangible personal property that's listed under this classification. And so if it is listed here, then that means that it would fall under a class 3. But again, if you don't see it listed here or elsewhere, it's probably going to fall under a class 2. The class 3 is generally for sales of services, so service businesses. I think we've got a couple of exempt services. So there are a couple of different categories that if your business falls within these categories, then you're going to be exempt from business tax. And so again, this list is also on our website. It's listed in the business tax guide as well, to great detail. Now, a good tip is just because your business that offers this service is exempt, if there are any sales of tangible personal property that your business is engaged in, then that activity may actually require you to pay business tax. So take, for example, veterinary services is listed here. Veterinary services are generally exempt from business tax. However, if that veterinary office happens to sell tangible personal property, maybe they sell dog tags, or maybe they sell, shampoo, or maybe they sell, whatever tangible personal property in their office, those sales would be they would need to pay business tax on those sales if they reach a certain threshold amount. And so if you find yourself falling into this category of being an exempt service for business tax, that's great, but then you have to ask yourself the question, are you engaged in any sales of tangible personal property that would make you be required to pay business tax? And so that's an important tip that we encourage taxpayers to analyze whenever they are determining whether or not they are liable for business tax. Here's a list of other common exemptions. And I think I've got this listed. Let's see. Yeah, so any persons employed in the capacity of an employee that could cause the business to be exempt for business tax. Manufacturers, so if your business is, if you're considered a manufacturer, then you're exempt from business tax. Any persons operating vending machines who exercise the option of paying gross receipts tax provided in Tennessee Code Annotated 67-4-506, that's exempt. Newspaper route carriers and newspaper peddlers. Again, we have this information listed on our website. Also, a good rule of thumb is, I believe, taxpayers who are medically blind and they can prove that they are blind, believe they have to submit documentation from their doctor. They are also exempt from business tax, and we have that specified on our website as well. And so if you happen to be a CPA and you have any clients that fall into that category, we've got that information on our website. But if you yourself find yourself in that category, then that's something that you could cause you to be exempt from business tax as well. Class 4. So class 4 is for contractors. All right. So what is a contractor? Contractor is engaged in constructing or improving real property. So constructing, building, erecting, repairing, grading, excavating. Any businesses that fall into this category, they're going to be considered a class 4. Installing tangible personal property, providing exterminating services, selling livestock, poultry, other farm products not exempted, they're going to fall under a class 4. And then, of course, receiving commissions from the sale of farm products belonging to others, that would define a business as being a class 4 business. Now, class 4 does not include landscaping and lawn care services. These services fall under class 3. Okay. And so we do get a lot of questions from landscaping companies whether they would fall under a class 4, and they do not. They would fall under a class 3. Class 4 contractors, so they're treated a little differently as it pertains to being required to file or remit business tax. And a lot of it has to do with the gross sales that are generated. Okay, so receipts of more than $50,000 in any jurisdiction, registration and license is required for both the city and the county. This applies to both in-state and out-of-state contractors. Okay, so that $50,000 threshold is really important. In-state contractors, receipts of $50,000 or less in a jurisdiction, no additional license is required other than the license for the domiciled location. Okay, so if you happen to have a physical location in Tennessee, you would not have to get a license other than your domiciled location unless you gross more than 50,000 in that jurisdiction. And you report back to the city and county of your domicile. So that's going to be where you primarily are filing your return. Out-of-state contractors, receipts of 10,000 to 50,000 in a county, they must pay the state business tax. And so again, we have some really helpful information pertaining to the breakdown of the sales threshold for contractors in Class 4. So if there's any questions about that, whether you're a CPA and you have clients, highly recommend to check that information out on our website. Or if you're a business that is engaged in these types of sales, then recommend you check that out as well. Class 5, so Class 5 has two subcategories. Class 5A includes industrial loan and thrift companies certified and licensed under Title 45, Chapter 5. For a current listing of these companies, see the website for the Department of Financial Institutions. Okay, they flesh that out a little bit more into better detail. And then Class 5B, that includes natural gas marketers. Now, the difference with Class 5 is the minimum tax due for all the other classifications is $22, as we mentioned at the very start of this presentation. The difference with a Class 5 is the minimum filing is actually $450. We don't get a lot of these businesses call into the general call center. I've probably received maybe 2 phone calls ever. However, they are out there, and if you are a business that falls into these categories, then just know that you have a minimal filing requirement of $450 annually. There's also some miscellaneous information pertaining to business tax. So when selling tangible personal property only in a booth at an antique mall, flea market, gun show, auto show, you're not subject to the business tax. County and city may impose a daily fee, and so that would be something that you would need to check with that local jurisdiction. For antique malls with separate booths, but one common register, only the mall operator is subject to the business tax on all receipts from that location. So the antique mall owner or whoever that operator may be, they are going to pay business tax on all the sales that are derived at that location. Transient vendors are excluded from business tax. Now, again, the city or county, they may impose a $50 fee for each 14-day period that they're licensed to sell goods at that location. And so if you find yourself into that category, then you may just want to reach out to your local government and see what the requirements are for there.
Niche, I'm going to interrupt you real quick on this one just to point out an important word here. Under the first bullet, talking about selling at antique malls, flea markets, etc., the word only there is very important. If you sell stuff at a flea market, but you also sell online or have gross sales at other places, you may still be subject to business tax based on that sales threshold. But if you are selling only, that's that key word there regarding selling at antique malls and such, not having to pay business tax.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you so much, Katie, for clarifying that. Yeah, that's with a lot of these things, it really depends on a lot of these minute details, but that keyword in this particular situation is very important. So if a business is, if an individual is only conducting their sales through the vehicle of an antique mall, then they wouldn't be subject to business tax because the operator of that mall does it. However, if they sell anything anywhere else, then that could potentially cause them to be liable. And so thank you, Katie, for adding that. Additional miscellaneous information, food trucks, they must be licensed for business tax in the jurisdiction where it is based. So whatever that domiciled location is, they need to choose what that domiciled location is going to be, and then they will just pay business tax to that domiciled location. So food trucks must display their license when selling in other jurisdictions. If a food truck remains in a fixed location outside of its domiciled location for over 180 days, a license must then be obtained in that jurisdiction. Okay, So it's with food trucks, obviously they can go wherever, but the big determining factor is the duration of time spent in that jurisdiction, and we have a threshold of over 180 days that would determine whether or not they need to get another license aside from their domiciled location. Short-term rental properties. So a short-term rental property is defined as 180 consecutive days or less of vacation lodging, including a person's home. That is subject to business tax. All right. So think of, an Airbnb, that's short-term rental. Taxpayers who own short-term rentals only need one business license per jurisdiction, regardless of how many properties are in that jurisdiction. All right. So if I have 5 properties in Davidson County, I only have to have one Davidson County business license, and I would just report all of the sales that generate from those short-term rentals to that one jurisdiction. All right. For business tax, gross sales from all properties within a jurisdiction are reported on their return. Rental sales made through Airbnb, VRBO, etc., should also be included in the business tax gross sales. And so if you have any clients, or if you yourself operate any Airbnb or VRBOs, this is very important information that pertains to you. There are a couple of deductions and credits that can be claimed on the business tax return. Some common deductions are some trade-in allowances, amounts paid to subcontractors. This is for class 4s only. Okay, so a contractor may hire a subcontractor to do a job. That subcontractor has a business license, all right? And so they're going to be filing their own business tax return. So the contractor would report the amount that they pay the subcontractors on gross sales, but then they would deduct them out in the deductions portion of the return, because that subcontractor should be paying tax on the amounts that they are paid. Sales of services delivered to customers out of state. And so obviously, if you are a business in Tennessee and you have customers that are outside of the state of Tennessee, then you can claim that as a deduction. Sales of tangible personal property in interstate commerce, bad debts, certain taxes. One thing that we encourage taxpayers to use is the instructions list of the return. You can access this on our website. It goes into great detail of each line item for the deductions list, and that can provide some clarity as to what specific bad debts can I use. And so we recommend you to check out that instructions list. It gives a little bit of information pertaining to some of those line items. Some common credits that can be used: personal property tax. Personal property tax that is paid to the local jurisdictions, that credit can be used on the business tax return. However, the credit cannot exceed 50% of the amount owed, right? So, and property must be at the location for the return. The comptroller's office does a pretty good job of defining personal property tax. I'm going to add that link to their website in the chat, and you can explore personal property and things of that nature, but just know that it can be claimed as a credit on the business tax return. It just cannot exceed that 50% of the amount owed.
I keep interrupting you here, Mitch, but another great resource I want to share on this specifically, another webinar. If you go to our taxpayer education page again and look under the webinar video archive under business tax, we did a webinar on filing the business tax return that breaks down these deductions and credits and gives examples and how they're applied. Like Mitch said, you can also look at the instructions that are on our old paper return, which we don't have instructions on TINTAP regarding this, but lots of great information in that webinar that we did regarding how to take deductions and credits on that business tax return.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that's the thing. I know that Katie keeps talking about these webinars, but these webinars are very important and they go over a lot of detailed information. And so a lot of the stuff we're covering from a general standpoint, but we've probably done a webinar on a very specific topic. And so highly recommend everyone to check out and explore just the webinar part of our website. It's got a lot of really, really helpful resources and information there. Another question that we get often is how to register. How do you register for business tax? So every taxpayer must register for each physical location that they have in the state. Obtaining a city or county license automatically registers the location. So a lot of times we encourage taxpayers, hey, go get your business license from the clerk first, all right? Because remember, earlier in the presentation, that clerk will import that information to us, the Tennessee Department of Revenue, and it registers that location in our system automatically. And so a lot of times we will just encourage new businesses, hey, go get your license first, and then that will create your business tax account. If you don't want to do it that way, you can register for the business tax account prior, but then we, of course, want to encourage the taxpayer to explain to that clerk, hey, make sure that they link the license that you get to this location that you've created. Out-of-state taxpayers, they must register directly on TINTAP, all right? Certain businesses are only required to have one license per jurisdiction. So like we said, Airbnb, short-term rentals, class 4s, cable providers, out-of-state vending machine businesses, vacation rentals, mobile telecommunications, those fall into class 3, and then micro markets. Those are businesses that are only required to have one license per jurisdiction. And do not use the job site address as location. Vacation rentals only use location on one of the rental properties in that jurisdiction. So for class 4s, we get a lot of questions, should I use my job site address as a location? No, we don't want to do that. Just use, that principal domiciled address for class 4s. Of course, if you reach the certain threshold that would cause you to be liable for business tax in another jurisdiction, then you would just go and register for that license in that jurisdiction. And then again, with short-term rentals, you only need one license per jurisdiction, regardless of how many properties you have. Again, when to file, we already went over this a little bit, but generally speaking, the due date is always the 15th day of the 4th month following the fiscal year end. The overwhelming majority of our taxpayers have a December fiscal year end, and so their due date is always going to be April 15th. However, if you're a business that has a different fiscal year end, then you just need to calculate the 15th day of the 4th month following the end of that fiscal year end, and that's going to be your due date for business tax. Now, the business license actually expires 1 month after the due date of the tax. All right, so the business license expiration date is the 15th of the month following the due date of the tax. I think the reason that this is the case, this confuses a lot of taxpayers because they think that the expiration date on their license is the due date of the tax, and that's not true. We believe that it gives businesses sort of a month grace period from when they file the return, April 15th, and they generally have, a month, so May 15th, to receive that brand new license from the clerk. All right. So if you are looking at your business license, you're probably going to see an expiration date that does not align with your due date, and that is by design. All right. So here's a cool little. There's also no option for filing extensions for business tax. So just be aware of that. There are other tax types for the Department of Revenue where you can apply for an extension, but business tax is not one of them. This timeline is kind of provides a little visual. So this assumes that you have a December fiscal year end that ends right here, and your due date, you have 4 months, 15 days to file that return, and then you have this grace period of once you filed your return, you will receive your new license, hopefully within this window of time, and it will replace that old license that you have. And so that's kind of how that process works. How to file, of course, we're always going to recommend taxpayers to file through TINTAP. It is the easiest way to ensure that everything gets filed correctly. And so the most important aspect is obviously we encourage taxpayers to create a TINTAP username, password. They need to gain access to the business tax account. Once you've logged into TINTAP under the business tax account, you can, to file the return, you click on the link that says view/file returns and click directly into the File Now link, and that will take you directly to the return. One very, very important note is
a lot of businesses have CPAs or accountants who take care of, their tax accounts for them. We still recommend all business owners to get their own 10-tap username and password and gain access to their accounts. That way they can always have a visual of the activity that's going on their tax accounts. We get a lot of business owners that are like, oh, I had a CPA that was supposed to do this, and they never did. And that taxpayer, that owner of the business, does not have their own username and password created, so they can't see anything. And so if you are a CPA or an accountant, in this webinar, really encourage your clients to create their own username and password whenever you're having conversations with them. That way they can be in the know and they can see exactly what's going on with their tax accounts. And then if you are a business owner and you do not have a username for 10-tap, then we strongly encourage you to create one and gain access to your account so you can see everything. Also, we have the option of being able to amend a return. And so just like any other tax type, you can amend a business tax return. To amend a business tax return, you would just simply click on View/File Returns, and then there's a link that says Amend Return, and that's where you can make changes to a return that has already been submitted. How to close an account. We get a lot of questions, hey, how do I close this specific location? Or how do I close my location in its entirety because the business closed? You can actually do both or either or. So closing all locations, closure requests along with the last return and payment, we should receive those within 15 days. All right. So if you know that your business is going to be closing, go ahead and file that final return and request to get that location closed out. That way you don't receive any nasty letters in the future. Because if you don't close out a location, our system is just going to assume that it's still opened or that it's still active. And so we won't know that there's no activity at that location until you actually close it out yourself through 10-tap. Maybe you want to only close one location instead of all locations. Closure requests, again, should be received within 15 days, and the taxpayer should wait until normal due date to file and pay the return. So you can choose to just close one location and keep the rest open, or if maybe let's say you have 10 locations, but you want to close 4 of them, you can do that. That's not a problem. You just have to navigate into 10-tap to do that. And to do that, when you gain access to your business tax account, there's going to be a link that says additional actions/licenses. When you click on that, there's going to be a link that says close account. When you click on that, it will ask if you want to close all locations. You'll select yes or no and fill in the information that it asks pertaining to the specific location you want to close. Businesses holding minimal activity licenses. So again, we do not administer the minimal activity licenses. Those are only administered through the clerk's office. And so if you want to close out a minimal activity license, then all you need to do is contact the clerk, whether it be the county or the city, and advise them that the business is no longer operational, and they will do what they need to do on their end to make sure that that gets closed out appropriately. If the business is sold to another entity, purchase money should be withheld to cover any taxes, interest, penalties that business may owe. This is only necessary until the former business owner can show proof from the Department of Revenue that all taxes have been paid and no interest or penalties are due. Under state law, the purchaser of the business can be liable for the unpaid taxes, penalties, and interest charges of the previous owner or operator. It really just depends on how that purchase agreement is written up. And so, if you're going to be selling your business off, then it really just depends on how that purchase agreement is written up and what the new owner of the business chooses to take over. And so that all can change the process of how the business is closed within our system. And of course, we've talked a lot about resources pertaining to business tax. So obviously we have general information portion of our website. If you go directly to the taxes tab on the Tennessee Department of Revenue's homepage, it pulls down a list of taxes that are administered by Revenue. Just click on business tax, and that will tell you everything that you need to know pertaining to business tax. We also have some FAQ articles on revenue help. And so you can just Google Tennessee revenue help, and we have a ton of articles pertaining to different topics that can be searched. We have a business tax manual on our website. You can navigate by clicking on the tax resources tab, click on tax manuals, and then that will direct you directly to the business tax manual. And then, as Katie has mentioned a couple of times, we have past webinars that we strongly encourage taxpayers to view and to watch if they have any questions. To navigate that, just go to the taxpayer education tab, tax webinars, and then we have a library where you can search depending on the specific tax type that you want to view. I think that concludes business tax, and I guess I will hand it over to Katie.
Great, thank you, Mitch. Very good information presented there on business tax. We are going, the resource page, hold on, let me take over here with the presenter so I can move slides around. These resources that Mitch pointed out here, we're going to have these listed for the sales tax portion and for the F&E tax portion of today's workshop. But also here in a little while, we are going to actually take you on a little field trip and show you where these resources are. So you can actually see where we're talking about. We'll do that when we have a section at the end of the workshop on resources. So I know that the chat has been very active and a lot of questions are being answered to the people that are asking us, asking the panelists questions, but I just wanted, since you can't all see each other's questions, I wanted to, before we go to break, bring up just a few questions that I saw that came up that might pertain to lots of you, just to bring those up here. One of the questions we got was, I've got a standard business license, but my sales were less than 10K, less than 10,000 in gross sales, but I have a standard business license. The answer to that question is, if you have a standard business license, if you obtain a standard business license, you are going to owe business tax even if your sales are under 10,000. The way I like to explain it is, once you obtain that standard business license, it turns a faucet on. You have a business tax account now, and you're going to be required to file and pay business tax until you close that business tax account. So if you've got sales of under 10,000, you're going to owe very little. It will be the minimum that you owe. Even just based on the math and the rate that you, depending on the classification. So, but yes, if you have that
Hey,
standard,
Katie,
yes,
let me tag onto that for just a quick
sure.
second. I agree with what you just said, but I would like to say one thing too. If you were to go down under $10,000 and you expect to be there, what you can do is you can actually, for subsequent years, you can go to the clerk's offices and you could say, hey, switch me over to this minimal activity license. And then they'll charge you $15 a year for a minimal activity license, and you don't have to pay any business tax to us anymore as far as that goes. But you can change it, but it needs to be done at the clerk's office. But like Katie said, it's not going to affect what you currently have. If you have that standard license, then yes, you do have the obligation to file and pay, like Katie said. I thought I would point that out.
Definitely.
Thanks.
And that leads right into another question I saw that got sent to us about what if my sales vary. Sometimes I have more than 10,000, sometimes I have less. That's going to be your choice. Just know that if you do have a standard business license, you are going to owe business tax. If you, like Billy just said, if you want to switch down to a minimal license, just to not have to file business tax. And if you're not meeting that 10,000 threshold, you would need to file a final return for business tax and then close it out on 10-tap, following the directions on this slide. After you do that, then you can go back to the clerk and say, hey, I want a minimal license now. Let's say your sales exceed 10,000. That'd be a good problem to have, right? You've got a minimal license and you go over 10,000. You will have to go switch to a standard business license at that point. A lot of people will start off with a minimal license because they're just not sure. Let's say everything goes great. Their business does gangbusters and they make a lot more than 10,000. Go to the clerk's office, get that standard license. At that point, you will have to pay another $15, and then you'll file business tax at that point. Switching back and forth between standard and minimal, we definitely don't want to encourage you to do that, or discourage you from doing that. It's going to be your choice whether you have and hold a minimal license or a standard license. We just want you to understand that if you have a standard license, you're going to be required to file and pay business tax, and then subsequently close out that business tax account if need be. So another question I saw that's a really good one was, once we file, does that automatically renew our license? So we touched on this. I'm going to go back some slides here. We'll see how closely I can get to it. Yeah, okay. We touched on it a little bit. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm going in the wrong direction here. I'll do it on this slide. So yes, all right. So let's say you're wanting to renew your standard business license. You do file and pay business tax to Tennessee Department of Revenue. So we're looking at that bottom over 10,000. You've got a standard business license. You've got a business tax account. You want to renew that license. You're going to file and pay business tax to us. The next step on our end is that we send that clearance saying, yes, this person, this business filed and paid business tax. They are eligible to renew. I'm actually going to go to the next slide here. We share that data that you filed and paid and are good to go. We share that back to the clerk's office. They are the ones who will then issue your renewed license. Now, with that said, some, actually most counties and cities do, once they push that button on their end and renew your license, most of them send a renewed license through to TINTAP. So you can actually view that license on TINTAP. Davidson County and Shelby, the two biggest counties here in the state, they don't participate in that. So they would send your license directly to you. So once you file and pay business tax, if you're located in those counties, you file and pay with us, we let them know, they'll send you a business license. But again, like I said, most cities and counties do participate in our TINTAP licenses, and we'll send, once they hit that button on their end saying, okay, I'm renewing this person because they filed and paid business tax, you can view that on TINTAP. And I'm going to go kind of fast here because we have one, and when we go through resources later and show you TINTAP, we'll show you more of this. But while I'm talking about it right now, I'm so sorry. I know this is kind of like running through all these, but
Hey, Katie, while you're doing that, let me just tell the folks, hey, first of all, thanks for hitting us up on the chat. We're trying to do our best to answer you individually. Because there are so many of you, we may not be able to hit every one of your questions in the chat, or in talking as far as that goes. So at the end, we're going to remind you how to get in contact with us, and you will get every question that you have answered, I promise, one way or the other. I just thought I would throw that out because hey, it's like 114 to 5, and that's a lot of people. But you guys are asking great questions, and we appreciate that a whole bunch. Thank you all very much.
Like Billy said, any questions that we don't get to during today, we'll give you some information later on how to get those to us after this. But you can see here the little snippet we have. What you're looking at here on this how to close is a snip of what it looks like on TINTAP once you're in your account. Where you're going to go, where you see the red arrow there, that's where you're going to go to close accounts. But it's also where you're going to go, see where it says additional actions / licenses. If your county and or city does participate in sending their licenses through to TINTAP, that's where you'll go to print off your license there. But again, if you ever have any issues with that or problems with viewing your license, you can, and if you think you are in compliance with your filing requirements, if you have filed and paid business tax, but you're not seeing your license here and think you should be, you can check with us just to make sure everything's good with your account. And then also then contact your county and city at that point if you're needing a copy of that license. So we are going to take a short break here. We'll come back in, let's see, I'm on Eastern time, so I've always got to do a little bit of math. I'm showing that it is 9:41 Central Time. We'll come back at 9:55 Central Time after a short break. I'm going to put that in the chat. And we'll see you then. Billy will be going over sales tax with us. So we'll see you in just a few minutes.
Okay, good morning, everybody. I guess we're back on here, and we're going to talk for the next few minutes here about Tennessee sales tax, which is one of our um, more common areas that we get a lot of questions on. And we hope that this is going to be helpful to you. I think that we could probably talk about sales tax for 2 days and not get to the end of it, but we're going to hit the high points that are going to be maybe the most important things to remember for new businesses out there. So we'll kind of touch on a few things here and hope that this will help you out. And of course, our folks will help you out with questions and chat as well. So let's look at some of the basics here first of all. So in Tennessee, the one thing you have to understand, this is a little bit different than business tax, okay? Business tax, like Mitch was saying earlier, applies to a lot of businesses in Tennessee, almost every business, unless it's exempt, like a doctor or a lawyer or somebody like that. But for sales tax, people that sell tangible personal property, you see TPP on the slide right here, that's tangible personal property. And that's, think of it as stuff that you can touch and feel. Okay. So those are generally subject to sales tax in Tennessee. There are a few exceptions, and we'll talk about some of those in just a little bit here too. But then there are some services, like it says on the slide as well, that are subject to sales tax, but they're not taxable unless they're specifically listed by law and or part of the sales price there too. So um, let's look at some of these exemptions for tangible personal property, like it says in the middle of the slide. If the purchase is made by an exempt entity, like a church or a school or the government or somebody like that. And sometimes products themselves are exempt, like healthcare products, textbooks for schools are exempt in the law. They've been declared to be exempt by the Tennessee legislature. So that's why they're listed in that way. And then sometimes they're exempt by the way that they're used, like in manufacturing. If you qualify for an industrial machinery exemption, you can get a certain tax advantage and pay at either a reduced rate or no rate, and in different times on different things. So that's how that works on tangible personal property. Now for services, um, again, the service is related to repairing tangible personal property or installing something or cleaning something that's tangible personal property, then that service is also taxable. So think about someone who might go and repair something in your home, like a dishwasher or a refrigerator or something like that. The parts and the labor would be subject to sales tax in that example there as well. And then, of course, they bring up some other taxable services in the law, like hotel rooms, lodging, um, other types of short-term space rental that it says there, in the parking and storage of motor vehicles. But there's only a very few services listed in Tennessee law that are actually subject to sales tax. So generally services are not subject to it. So just kind of keep that understanding as we move along here. All right, so let's talk about the definition of sales price. So when you talk about what you have to pay sales tax on in Tennessee, you're looking at the cost of the property and the materials, like it says here, and any labor cost or interest and all the other things that you see on the slide. The one thing I do want to mention is the delivery charges, because we get that question a lot. So if you are charging someone for delivering the item that's been purchased, then you're going to also include that for sales tax purposes. And this is more typical now, maybe than it has been because of the situation with transportation costs. Sometimes those are being pushed along to the customers as well. So just remember to charge sales tax on those delivery charges. We actually have a notice on our website that explains that as well. Okay. So again, we don't want to belabor any of these points here because we do have a lot of material to cover, but just keep that in mind that the sales price is what you paid for it, plus any of these additional costs that you see on this slide. Okay. So let's look at the rates here for just a second. So the general state sales tax rate in Tennessee is 7%. So when you're buying an item of tangible personal property, or you're paying tax on a taxable service, the state rate is 7%. Now, if it's a food item, then it is 4%. Okay, so it is reduced by really 3%. 7 minus 4 is 3. So you pay a little bit less on food. Now, just real quick here on food, understand that food is defined in the law as items that you would buy more or less at a grocery store, that are not prepackaged or heated types of items, not restaurant food, as an example. Okay, so basically that's the layman's definition of it, and we may get a little more technical on that here in a little while. Okay. Now, in addition to the state rates, we have local rates throughout the state. So any county or city has already established their local sales tax rate out there. The lowest one in Tennessee is 1.5%. And there are just a couple of places that have it just that low. Now, the maximum rate is actually 2.75%, like it says here on this slide. That's the most local tax that you can pay. Okay. And the local tax is only charged on the first $3,600 of the I'm sorry, I said that wrong. I apologize. The first $1,600 of the price of any particular item. Okay, we'll talk about that a little bit later. Specified digital products. These are special products that have been defined in the law as having a special tax classification. Things that are sort of electronic in nature. They do have a 7% state rate and a flat 2.5% local rate. Okay, instead of that local tax rate, and we'll maybe talk about that here in a little while as well. Okay, moving on. Okay, so take a deep breath and just sit back and think about this for just a second. So, single article tax is a tax that is a state level tax, and it's based on items that are expensive. Okay, items that basically exceed $1,600 in value. So we use this example here of the car. Okay, so as you can see at the top of the slide here, when we talk about the car itself, the entire sales tax, or excuse me, the entire sales price is taxed at the 7% state rate. Okay, so you're going to pay 7% on that car, and that's all the charges, the accessories, the parts, and everything else on that car you're going to pay on. Okay, now notice at the bottom where we kind of break this out for you, only the first $1,600 is subject to local tax. Okay, so again, it's based on the local rate where the car is sold. So wherever that dealer is, they charge their rate. Okay, so if you do some quick math on that, you'll find out that 1,600 times 2.75% is a maximum of $44. Okay, so that's good for people that are buying expensive items like cars and maybe expensive pieces of furniture or jewelry or whatever it might be. Just understand that your local tax is limited to a max of $44, which is kind of great. Now that $1,600 to $3,200 level, this is where the state single article kicks in. Okay, and that rate is always 2.75%. It just happens to be the same as the maximum local rate. They're not really tied together, but it is a flat 2.75%. So basically every dollar between $1,600 and $3,200 pays this extra state single article tax of 2.75%, which again, if you do the math on that, if you're up to the $3,200, there's another $44. Okay, so in the example of this car right here, think of this: 7% state rate plus whatever the local rate is times the first $1,600, maximum of 44, and then another $44 in this example, assuming that the car is more than 3,200, which of course these days that would be kind of hard to find a car that's less than $3,200. So anyway, I hope the example helps you understand that a little bit better, because it's pretty hard to explain that. Katie, did you want to make any comments on this?
Can you guess what I'm going to say?
Oh gosh, I don't know about that, Katie. You can tell me though.
Okay, this upcoming October free tax webinar. We
Oh
have a free tax
yes.
webinar
Oh
the last
yes.
Tuesday of every month. This month in this month, October, the monthly tax webinar is dedicated just to single articles. So I'm going to put the link to how to register to that. If you believe
Nice.
that this is going to apply to you or just want more information on that, you should register and attend our October webinar.
Yeah, we can give you even more information and talk more about cars and other expensive things. So yeah, that's awesome. Thank you, Katie. Yes, we'll be happy to do that and looking forward to it. All right. So talk about some exemptions here. If a purchaser who is also a retailer buys something with the intent of reselling it and presents a valid resale certificate, no sales tax is owed. So here's the deal. When you register for sales tax in Tennessee, we're going to send you a resale certificate so that you can buy the items that you're going to sell and not have to pay sales tax on those items. That is super important to do and to make sure that you do it. Now, what we also tell you is that your resale certificate, what you'll want to do is to probably print one off and go make some copies of it, because as you go to the different places where you buy your items, they'll ask you for a copy of your certificate and you'll have to give them one. Don't give them your original. Make sure to give them a copy. So that way you've got that, and keep one in your file. Okay. And of course, if you lose it or you need us to print one out for you again or email it to you, just let us know and we'll fix it up for you. We'll send it right away to you. Um, and of course, we recognize resale certificates from other states too. So if taxpayers are registered in any of our other states, if they come here to buy items for resale, you can accept that out of state resale certificate too. And of course, they're issued by location. It says a little further down in the slide. So if you have multiple locations, we do need you to register each location, and you'll get a certificate of registration and a resale certificate for every one of your locations. And they don't expire, but when you close your location, then effectively it's closed as well. There's something in the law that says you're supposed to return your resale certificate to the Department of Revenue. That's probably a little antiquated because in the age of electronics and all that. You just don't want to use it anymore because you're not open. So you don't want to be in violation of the law by using it when you're actually not open. Okay. All right. So that's what a resale certificate looks like. We kind of highlighted a few areas there that show the effective date and some of the language there in the middle of that there too. I wonder if I could blow this up a little bit, maybe make you see that a little bit better. And then it talks about the fact that it's being used to buy items for subsequent resale without payment of sales and use tax. That's your whole idea behind that. Okay. So make sure you're using that resale certificate when you can. Make sure you're only using it for items that are in your business that you're actually going to resell. Okay. Don't use it for personal use. There have been instances where people have done that and gotten into trouble. I don't think you'll do that. So just make sure that you use it for its intended purpose.
Hey, Billy,
Yes, ma'am.
on that, even if it's being used for your business, not necessarily being resold. So let's say you're buying cleaning supplies to clean your shop. Uh, Even though it's being used for your business and for business purposes, you're not reselling that item. So even supplies and stuff that you're going to be using, maybe you're buying shelving for your shop. That's not going to be resold, right? You're just going to be using it to
Right.
display things. You
Right.
cannot use your resale certificate for
Yeah,
that.
that's
Just for
that's an excellent point, Katie. And here's another example too, since we brought it up. So let's say that you operate a grocery store. So you have a grocery store and you've bought items, and let's just say that you have bought some brooms and mops and things like that, and you have them for sale. Well, guess what? Your broom or mop wore out in your back room and you need it to sweep the floor and clean up, right? So you go grab one off the shelf. What you'll do there is you'll note that you've taken that broom or mop out of inventory, and you'll pay what we call a use tax, which is the equivalent of sales tax. You'll put that on your sales tax return, because guess what? You bought that broom or mop using your resale certificate because you intended to resell it. Well, you did not resell it because you used it, and that's use tax. So if you just pay us back the sales tax on that item, we're good. That's fine. And that happens all the time. So is what you just want to do is keep up with that kind of thing and just make sure that you're not violating and you're paying use tax on it. So thanks for Katie for your comments on that as well. Okay. And of course, we can verify these certificates on 10-tab under the information and inquiries section there too. But you do need to keep a copy of these certificates. So if you are receiving these from other people, make sure that you keep a copy of them, because if someone from the Department of Revenue audits and says, hey, you've got to prove all these resales, where's your certificates? And you don't have them, they're going to make an assessment. So I don't think that's going to be something that you want to happen, and I think you'll be good with it, and you'll figure that out by keeping copies of all these certificates. Okay. All right. So we talked about earlier some exemptions and how you could have an exempt entity. Okay. So some examples that we want to bring up here just real briefly are our farmers, our nurserymen, our timber harvesters and stuff. Their exemption extends to the items that they're using to produce agricultural products. Okay. So this can be anything from seeds to fertilizers to tractors. Cannot be automobiles, by the way, or actual motor vehicle trucks. But basically, qualified farmers are exempt, and they receive an exemption certificate. They do have to fill out an application, and we have to approve that as well. Also, manufacturers, they will fill out an application for industrial machinery exemption. So when they're producing items from raw products and turning them into something new, that's the classic definition of industrial machinery, and they will be allowed to receive exemptions on certain things like energy, fuel, and water, and other items that they're using for manufacturing, directly manufacturing the products. Okay. Governments, Tennessee, state government, county government, city governments, and the federal government are exempt under Tennessee law. Other governments that are other states and cities and counties that are not Tennessee, they are taxable. Okay. So in other words, we honor anybody in Tennessee and also the federal government. For nonprofits, you see here, nonprofits that are qualified nonprofits like 501c3 entities, charitable entities, people like that, they can apply to receive an exemption. So when they are buying items that they're going to either use for their organization or that they might be using to give away in certain situations as well, they can receive an exemption from us for that, so that they don't have to pay sales tax on it. And that's a good thing. It's a very good thing to do, and we love to approve those. And again, we do have to have certain documentation sent with the application, and you can find out more information on our website about that if you'd like. So we talked about some product-based exemptions. So this is tied directly to what the item actually is. We brought up textbooks and things like that earlier, and healthcare products, but probably a lot of you know gasoline. You don't pay sales tax on gasoline. We pay fuel tax on gasoline, but we don't pay sales tax on gasoline. Obviously, some other things we mentioned earlier: industrial machinery, R&D or research and development machinery, agriculture, and all that. You do have to have this certificate, and we already brought that up. Okay. Going a little bit fast because I think we're going to probably have some questions at the end here as well. Interstate commerce. This is a very, very good question because You know, a lot of you may be involved in online businesses or you're selling to people who are outside Tennessee. Just realize that if that sale is from your location here in Tennessee and your customer takes possession of that item outside the state, you do not charge them Tennessee sales tax. That is a sale in interstate commerce. Now, in the same breath, let's just say this, that customer that's outside Tennessee may have a tax obligation to pay use tax on that item that they've acquired. Okay. So in other words, when you ship an item, let's say from Tennessee to a customer in Kentucky, well, that person in Kentucky receives the item. You did not charge them sales tax, but they may very well owe a Kentucky use tax to the state of Kentucky for that item that they've brought into that state. But that's up to the laws of the state where the person lives. Okay. So if you're a Tennessee seller on this, you are not going to have to worry about that. That's not your problem. Okay. The only thing you need to do is to exempt it from Tennessee sales tax. Okay. And that is something we get questions on all the time. Okay, so let's talk about some real basic stuff here about how to actually register for sales tax. Now, this blue box on the right-hand side of this slide is the most important thing I could tell you, well, one of the most important things anyway I can tell you about sales tax. And it says, and I quote, you will be liable for filing a sales tax return beginning from the date you open your sales tax account, even if no sales are made during that period or really any other period. Okay, so Katie mentioned turning on the faucet. You know, if you turn on the faucet for business tax or sales tax or whatever, then you're in that you are in the game, so to speak. Okay. So when you're registered and you have set up for, let's use as an example, a monthly sales tax return, we have to receive a monthly sales tax return every single month without exception until you're closed. Okay. If you don't file it, you'll get an assessment letter that says you owe us hundreds of dollars of an assessment. And you don't owe that money, and we don't want you to pay it. All we want you to do is to file the return and pay it. And of course, it's due by the 20th of the following month or the month that follows your tax period. We're going to talk about that in a second anyway. But again, I can't stress this enough that you do have to file and pay for every single period. Katie, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, one thing that I think we have failed to put into a slide here, but it's regarding registration, is
Okay.
there are some thresholds with whether you're going to be required to register and collect and then pay sales tax. And that is if you are in Tennessee and you are meeting a sales threshold of $4,800 annually of tangible personal property sales. So tangible personal property exceeding $4,800 annually, then you're required to
Basically
have sales tax.
$400 a month. Yeah,
Right. And then if for sales of services for in-state businesses, that threshold is $1,200 annually.
right. That's correct. And of course, for out-of-state people, we operate on a completely different idea of a threshold for out-of-state folks, $100,000 and all that as well. But we can talk you through any of these questions that you might have. So we encourage you, if you don't know and you can't find on our website exactly about your situation, we want you to email us or give us a call, and we'll figure it out with you and see if you really do need to register. Which is a great point too. We do want you to register, but we don't want you to register unless you need to register. And we also don't want you to register until you need to register. Okay. So if you're thinking about starting a business, that's not a great time to register. Okay. You need to sort of think this whole thing through and figure out exactly when you're going to start, because you'll start a paperwork situation for yourself when you're not really ready to go, and it's going to maybe cause you trouble. And I say trouble, not that you can't get out of it, but do you really want to be burdened with filing tax returns for months and months when you haven't even opened your door? That's probably not a great idea. Do it more towards when you actually start to begin the business and you've really kind of figured it all out. Okay. All right. So let's talk specifically more about when to file. Talked about the 20th day of the following month. If that 20th falls on a on a weekend or a holiday, then it goes to the next business day automatically as far as that goes. So we talk about three different kinds of filers. Annual filers. Very few people are annual filers, but we do have people like certain manufacturers that have very low liabilities normally. We just ask them to file a return for every year, and it's due by January 20th. Quarterly filers, a little more common, are people who just have to file 4 returns a year. So for January, February, and March, that return would be due by April 20th, and then going 4 more times throughout the year as far as that goes. But more typically, monthly filers. This is where most everybody ends up, and it's due by the 20th of the next month. Okay, those are your filing frequencies that are set up right there too. Oddly enough, there's also an odd filing frequency for people who sell at special events, and that's all they sell at. They might come to the fall festival and sell something in Tennessee, and then they might come back in the spring and sell something else. We have them set up and registered in a specific way that we have to actually create a period for them to file on and do some special work, but they work with our registration units on that. I'm not going to complicate that too much by discussing it a whole lot more, but there is that out there for those special events. Okay. All right. Katie, I'm trying to advance here. Hold on just a minute. There we go. Let's see. Sorry, I kind of froze up there for a second. So how do you file these tax returns? Well, you get access to the TIN-TAP system, or Tennessee Taxpayer Assistance Portal. So you create a username and password to get and gain access to your tax account, and then you'll have a link there to view and file your returns, or you can click on the File Now link, which is very easy to do for the period that you want to file for. So what happens is on the first day of the following tax period, we actually have the periods out there on TIN-TAP, and you're able to file them at that point once the tax month or a quarter or annual period is ended. And another thing we get questions on is how do you fix a return? Let's say you filed a return and you need to fix it because you filed the wrong figures. You can amend the return by clicking on the View File Returns link and then choose the period that you want to amend and click on Amend Return and then put in your correct figures. Okay, so if you owed us any more money, all you do is pay us the difference from what you've already submitted. But if it creates a credit and you'd overpaid, then the credit will be on your account on TIN-TAP to be used in a subsequent period. Or you could request a refund of the credit, but refunds do take a pretty good while to process. So you may want to think about maybe not doing that and using that credit in a subsequent period because it's just a little bit easier to do. So what you end up doing is underpaying the next period by that credit so that it absorbs it. Okay, kind of like if you overpaid your electric bill or water bill or something like that, there would be a credit on there for you to use later on too. Okay. All right. Hope that didn't confuse you, but I hope it's helpful to you. All right. So, of course, this slide here talks about those links that we just discussed here about how to hit the File Now button or to do the View File Returns. And then, of course, there's questions that are asked throughout the filing process. So the first question here, let me try to blow this up a little bit for you. It's a little hard to see, but it says, will you be submitting a return using a software vendor? Yes or no? Okay. Well, almost all of you are going to say no because you're not using any special software. Okay. If so, make sure to click on no, which brings up one other thing here as well. if you are going to file a sales tax return with us, you'll get these yes and no questions, but you have to answer every one of the questions. Okay. So what happens a lot of times is people will get frustrated when they're filing and they'll say, it's not taking it. It's not taking all my figures. It's not calculating. Well, normally that's because you didn't scroll down and answer all of the yes and no questions in the filing process. So make sure you do that because that's super important because it will cause you to not be able to file it on 10 tap if you're not careful. Okay. All right. And this is another example of the yes and no questions here too. Do you have any sales to report? Yes or no? Typically it'll be yes, because you're going to just show us whatever you've sold. But if you didn't sell anything that particular month, hey, life just got very simple. You'll click on no and then okay, and then you'll be asked to put in your password. You'll get a confirmation number and you're done. It's so easy. Okay. So super easy to do there too. Katie, I see your head popping on there. Tell me what
Here it
you
is.
got. All
A
right.
few slides ago, when you were talking about registering for sales tax and how it does turn on that faucet,
Uh-huh.
since we've got probably a lot of new businesses or people that are thinking about going into business, it's understandable that you might want to, maybe a few months before you open your doors, want to use that resale certificate to buy product, right? That you're going to be reselling. So you may want to register for sales tax in order to go ahead and get that resale certificate. Like we keep saying, it turns that faucet on. But for those months in between when you're just getting set up, maybe using the resale certificate to buy product, but you have not yet sold anything, this is where that would come into play. You would be required to log in that next month after you've opened up that sales tax account sometime before the 20th of the next month. And it's as simple as just, if you haven't sold anything yet, this very first question, once you open up that return for that location, that's where you would just click no and then click
Right.
OK and then be done. You don't know anything because you haven't sold anything. Now, we'll get in a little bit later. We're going to talk about what happens when you don't file timely. But if you were to do this, click no, click OK, submit.
Mhm.
You didn't know anything because you didn't collect anything. If you were to do that even just one day late, you're going to owe a minimum penalty there. So
Right.
real important there for you new businesses that if you're going to get that, if you're going to open up that sales tax account and get, so you can use your resale certificate to get started, make sure you do this timely. Just
Yeah.
simple, takes 2 seconds. Log in, click no, submit, and you're done with that.
Exactly. Thanks, Katie. That's great advice. All right. So how do you get out of business? How about that? How do you close a business? You can see on here that if you've got the certificate of registration, mail it back to us. If somebody buys your business, they need to register themselves. Okay, they cannot continue to use your sales tax numbers or any of your other numbers. Okay. Now, if it's a corporation or something like that, or an LLC we just have new owners or new officers, so to speak, that will continue to exist. Okay, but for sole proprietors, people like yourself that might be a sole proprietor, you're going to close down, and the new person is going to open that back up. And then, of course, you do have to file the final return. We get this question a lot, even on business tax a lot. It's like, well, I went out of business in June of 22, and I don't owe this tax for 22. Actually, you do owe the tax because you were open for 6 months of the year of 2022, and you've got to file that final return even if you went out of business. Same thing goes with the sales tax returns and the franchise and excise returns and all these other returns. So just because you're out of business doesn't mean your job is over, because you do have to file these final returns. Super important, because if you don't do it, we're going to send assessment letters and collections gets involved and stuff like that. And you don't want any of that. You can take care of all this stuff up front and do it the right way. And one of the things you can do is just to reach out to us if you don't understand it. We'll talk you through it. We'll tell you what to click on. We'll tell you exactly what you need to do. Okay. Very good. So some resources here for you, like Mitch mentioned earlier, tons of stuff on our website here. You guys can see that, but I want to particularly mention the third bullet down, the sales tax manual. I cannot tell you how wonderful these manuals are. These manuals are basically like going to a library where you can find tons and tons of information about whatever topic you're going to talk about. Business tax, sales tax, franchise and excise tax. People have spent a lot of time putting these resources together. So it's kind of like looking at our manuals at the Department of Revenue and using them in your business. So it's free information. It's wonderful out there. And we've got all the webinars. Katie mentioned the one we're doing on single article next month. Do that. If you're viewing this recording later, go out and look at this recording or any of the other recordings we have for webinars. We're glad to help you with that too. And of course, we have a lot of FAQ questions out there on our website as well. Okay, so with that, I think that wraps up sales tax there. And Katie, I'll ask if we want to talk about any particular issues or if we need to go into other taxes at this point. You're
Oop,
muted.
gotta unmute myself.
There
I
you
think
go.
for now we'll go ahead and charge forward. And if
Okay.
we've got time at the end, I made note. I know that we're answering questions that come to us as we go along, but there may be a few that we want to bring up here at the end if we've got time. But I want to make sure we get through the content. So we'll
Yeah. And one thing real
power
quick,
forward.
Katie, that I'd like to point out just super fast is, again, just a reminder for everybody on here. Hey, if we don't get to your question, we're going to tell you how to get your question answered at the end. Okay. You're going to have a phone number and you're going to have an email address, and we will answer your question, and we'll answer it quickly too. Okay. So don't feel bad if we didn't get you, and we apologize up front for maybe not being able to answer everybody's question, but I think we'll be able to help most of you today. And if not, you're going to have a backup. Okay.
That's right.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Billy.
You're welcome.
It's really hard to sum up in just a few minutes all these tax types, but like we've said, we're giving you an overview right now, and then hopefully the resources that you would need to dive a little deeper. But we are going to go into now talking about some other taxes, specifically going to touch on franchise and excise tax basics, and then some other information about taxes as well. Let's start talking about franchise and excise tax. What is it? It's the combination of two different taxes. Franchise tax is the greater of net worth or the book value of real or tangible personal property that is owned or used in Tennessee, plus the excise tax, which is basically net earnings or income for the tax year. Those two things combined equals our F&E tax. So who is liable for franchise and excise tax? Basically, all for-profit foreign and domestic entities that are chartered, qualified, or registered in Tennessee or doing business in Tennessee are liable for franchise and excise tax. This includes corporations, limited partnerships, LLCs, business trusts. You are going to be subject to F&E tax from the date of formation. And just like we've talked about how with business tax, getting that standard business license turns on the faucet, makes you liable for business tax. Basically, chartering with the Secretary of State does the same thing. It's a little bit different because it doesn't automatically. If you were to go to the Secretary of State before coming to us and you formed your business, registered with the Secretary of State, if you do not come over to Department of Revenue and register with us, which we'll talk about how to register. If you don't do that, you're going to get a letter in the mail from us because we do communicate with the Secretary of State. You're going to get a letter that says, hey, we see that you've registered with the Secretary of State. Now you need to register for franchise and excise tax. Likewise, even if you have not yet registered for the Secretary of State and you are an LLC, if that's in your name, if that is what you are, if you are an LLC, a limited partnership, corporation, etc., you are going to be liable for F&E tax from the date that you started your business. All right, how to register. Just like with all of our tax types, you're going to register on TNTAP. You're going to go to tn.gov/revenue, and you don't even have to log in yet or anything. There is a link there that says registration. and it'll walk you through the steps of how to register. If you know that you're going to need lots of different tax types, you can do them all at once. You'll just check the box for F&E, for sales tax, for anything that you're wanting to register for, but that's how you do it. And again, what you see in the little info box here, just to reiterate, you are subject to F&E tax from the date of formation. All right, when to file F&E. So we're looking at a timeline here that, just like our business tax example that we gave, we're assuming that you have a fiscal year end of 12/31 here. It's going to be due on the 15th day of the 4th month. All right, so for this example, we are looking at a fiscal year end of December. On April 15th, that is when you will have to file and pay your return, file an extension and pay, or file and pay the minimum, which for F&E tax is $100. Just like with business tax, it was $22 for most classifications. For F&E, the minimum is $100. Unlike the other tax types that we've talked about, there is the option to file an extension for F&E. Now, keep in mind that's an extension to file, not an extension to pay. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a minute. But it used to be a 6-month extension, and in 2021, there was our legislature decided to change that and make it a 7-month extension. So in this example, the 7-month extension would put that filing deadline for F&E out to November 15th. I know that this makes a lot of CPAs happy. If we've got any CPAs or accountants on here, you've got an extra month to file that F&E return. Now, for some entities, quarterly or estimated payments are required. We'll talk about that here in a minute, but just for purposes of looking at this timeline, we call them quarterly payments, but they're not quite quarterly. It's mainly just for estimated payments. You can see here if estimated payments apply to you, which we'll go into, they're going to be due. The first one's going to be due on that April 15th, the second one on June 15th, then September 15th, and then of January 15th of the next year is when that 4th quarterly estimated payment would be due. This slide's going to look familiar to you at this point. How to file. All filing is required electronic now. You would need to file on TIN-TAP, and again, we'll go into more TIN-TAP basics later, but filing is required on TIN-TAP electronic filing. Same with amending your return. Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about that minimum filing. F&E minimum is going to be applicable to any taxpayer with a franchise liability equal or less to $100. Now, this includes a taxpayer that is active, that has no net worth or book value of real or tangible personal property. Remember the first slide we talked about with franchise tax, that's what franchise tax is based on. But if you have no net worth or book value, or nothing used or owned in Tennessee, or no revenue, $100 is what's due. So even if you are inactive, you have no net worth, no revenue, and your charter has been forfeited, revoked, or suspended without having been properly dissolved or properly terminated, you're still going to owe that $100 until you properly dissolve your business. Out-of-state company that is incorporated in Tennessee, even if there's no property, payroll, or sales within Tennessee, must file the full return with an apportionment schedule in. And all this might sound a little bit overwhelming, especially for a new business. We're going to share some resources here in a little while that will help you maybe make some more sense of it too. Again, we could probably spend a whole day talking just about F&E, probably a whole week really. But the easiest way to file that minimum return is you can do it without even logging in to your TIN-TAP account. Although we do recommend you having a TIN-TAP account for sure to be able to access all your tax accounts. The easiest way, if you just need to file that minimum F&E, is to do it without logging in. And when we take a little tour later of TIN-TAP, we'll show you this, but you would go to tn.gov/revenue and then click on TIN-TAP. And then without logging in, you're just going to click on view return links and then minimum F&E, $100, and it'll walk you through some questions. Can't miss it. You'll need a little bit of information there to do so, but it's very easy to do, and you don't want to miss that deadline to be able to file that minimum, which of course, you don't want penalty and interest there. So mark that on your calendars. If you are registered with Secretary of State or you're an LLC, and you have formed sometime here in 2022, which we're in right now, go ahead and mark your calendar for April 15th of next year, even if you're not really making any money yet or don't have any property owned or you think you're going to owe that minimum. It's going to be due on April 15th if you're a December fiscal year end business. Easy to do though. All right, now we're going to talk about those estimated payments. So taxpayers are required to make estimated payments. It bugs me that we call them quarterly because, again, like I said, they're not quite exactly on the quarter, but we'll just call them estimated payments. If there's a combined F&E tax liability of $5,000 or more for both the prior and current tax year. So if you're a new business, this is not even going to apply to you because you don't have a prior year yet, right? But once you get going, just keep this in mind. If you've got a liability of $5,000 or more for both the current year and the prior year, you're going to owe estimated payments. And again, we showed you these dates on the little on the slide with the timeline on it. But the first payment's going to be due on the 15th day of the fourth month of the current taxable year. The second one due on the 15th day of the sixth month. Third one due on the 15th day of the ninth month, and then the fourth one's going to be due that next calendar year on the 15th day of the first month. All right, now we're going to talk a little bit about extensions. So to receive that 7-month extension, which used to be a 6-month, but now is a 7-month extension, taxpayer must have paid on or before the original due date the following: either 90% of the current period's liability or 100% of the previous period's liability, or $100 if the previous period does not exist. So just going to make the assumption here that I know that's not the case, but that we have all new businesses on here. You're a new business that formed here in 2022, and you've got a December fiscal year end. By next April 15th, you would need to pay $100 if you're wanting to file an extension, if you want to have a 7-month extension to file that return. Now, I think I go into this on the next slide a little bit. Yeah, I'll skip forward here. The extension is automatic if the payment requirements have been met. So there's nothing further as long as you meet these payment requirements by the filing deadline, you've got your extension, okay? To do so, when you go in to make that payment, even if you're doing the easy way, like that I showed you to file that minimum, you're going to want to choose extension payment if you're wanting an extension to file. There's not a need to place or formally request an extension. It just happens automatically if you choose this payment type. Once you do go to file sometime before the extension deadline, you will need to, there's a question that's going to pop up, and just like what Billy was talking about with the sales tax return, it goes the same with all of our returns that you file. There's lots of little yes, no questions, and sometimes those get overlooked, and we do get calls about that. There's always going to be a little red asterisk if something is required, okay, just like with most online forms. But there is going to be a question where it asks you, have you filed for an extension? And you'll want to choose yes there if that's the case. All right, very important here, how to close F&E account, how to properly terminate or withdraw your charter. So what you're going to do is file a final F&E tax return by the due date or by the extension. You're going to submit a schedule of liquidation, distribution, or disposition of assets with that final return. You're going to pay everything you owe, of course, and then you'll get tax clearance. If you do have other tax accounts that have balances on them or that you haven't filed for, you'll have to do that as well. But then you'll provide that tax clearance along with your articles of dissolution to the Tennessee Secretary of State. One important thing I want to just make note of here for anyone thinking about going into business, and I'm not going to begin to give you any kind of legal advice, but I just want to say, think about it long and hard before you decide if you want to be a corporation or limited liability. A lot of times it's going to depend on what you're doing. If you want to have that limited amount of liability on you personally, right? But just think long and hard about it, because once you do decide to become an LLC, there are a lot of requirements here. And like I said, a whole nother tax account that you're liable for. F&E tax and closing is a little bit more difficult when you do have an F&E account and when you are registered with the Secretary of State. If you don't, in the box here at the bottom of this slide, if you don't file F&E on time, it can result in revocation of your charter or certificate. So very important there. All right. Again, just the same resources as we've shared with you for the other tax types we've had. Great information on just our general tax page. Go to tn.gov/revenue and click on taxes and scroll down to F&E. Got great revenue help articles that can answer a lot of your questions. But mainly, we really want to point you towards the manual, especially any tax preparers that we have on here. The F&E tax is pretty complicated. There's lots of schedules. I will say, I think that sales tax and business tax are pretty cut and dry when it comes to filing. F&E, a little more complicated. So great resources here for you. Again, that manual is great. And we have a lot of webinars about F&E, different exemptions, breaking down information on different schedules. If you go to that tax webinars page and look at the drop down under F&E tax and the webinar video archive, video library, I'm sorry, you'll see a ton of F&E tax webinars that we've done, because it's a pretty massive tax with lots of information on it. So without going into all the other taxes that we do have over 24 state taxes and fees. Some other major ones that may apply to you might be liquor by the drink, tire fee. I think I did see something over in the chat from someone who has a tire business, motor fuel, tobacco taxes. You can find information about all these taxes on our website, tn.gov/revenue. For general information, just click on taxes and choose your tax type. We do have several manuals. There is an alcoholic beverages manual, for example. There's some other great manuals that we've got. And when Mitch comes back with us here in a few minutes to go through our resources, he'll show you where those are when we take a little tour of the website. All right. This is the not so fun stuff, delinquencies. We do not want to get into this situation, okay? We've shared with you for sales tax, business tax, and F&E what the due dates are. You can, for any other taxes that might apply to your business, you can check out what those due dates are on the tax page. But if the tax return is not filed and paid timely, then you're going to start racking up penalty and interest. The penalty is 5% of the unpaid amount for each month, with a maximum of 25%, and interest is computed at the current rate of interest. And I cannot remember off the top of my head, because that changes every year. I can't remember exactly what that is right now. Anyone else on the panel, if you can recall what that rate is right now, you can throw that into the chat. So let's just say you do not file and pay timely. There's a collections timeline that will come into play. The first thing that's going to happen if we haven't received a return from you, and or we have insufficient or deficient payment for a return, you're going to get a letter from us about 30 days after it's due, after the tax is due. It's called a notice of proposed assessment. If you have not filed yet, the action item there is to file, okay? What the dollar amount you're going to see on that notice of proposed assessment, if you've not filed, it's going to be an estimated amount. That's confusing for some people because they think, oh, this is just a bill, I need to pay this. No, really what you need to do is to file the return and then find out what you really owe. If you just paid that estimated amount, gets you out of collections for the time being, but you'll have to go in and file that return eventually. And we've got some information on our website. If you go to tn.gov/revenue and click on tax resources, there's some collections information that can help you with that. Hopefully that will not apply to anyone that is in this workshop. It's part of what we're doing this for, is to make sure you understand everything so you don't fall into this situation, right?
Katie, I put the interest rates in chat.
Thank you.
You're
What is
welcome.
it? I need to put that in my
It's
brain.
8%. It's currently 8%. But if you have an installment payment arrangement, it's actually 11% on that.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that up, the payment arrangements that we have. We do have payment plans. If your tax liability is something that you cannot pay currently, you may qualify for a payment plan. And again, there's more information about that. Best place for information about payment plans is in Revenue Help, one of those help articles. So that might be helpful to you. It's been mentioned about.
Hey, Katie, real quick on that. Super important to remember. Um, don't think that it's a great idea to get a payment plan because these interest and penalty charges are kind of high. And you really don't want to do that unless you absolutely have to. Now, you're way better off doing it if you're stuck and you have no other way to do it. We get that. And you want to work with people on that in our collections division. But the thing is, the charges are high and you don't really want to do that. You want to find a way to pay it because when you add these penalty and interest charges together, you'll find out that there's probably cheaper ways for you to deal with your financial situation than to deal with us. Although, like I say, don't ignore it. Don't just let bills stack up because you definitely don't want enforced collection like liens and levies. So I'm just throwing that
No.
out there for you. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Billy. I used to work in our collections division with Department of Revenue, and I would say the vast majority of accounts that fell into collections were actually people that just didn't realize that they went out of business and they didn't realize that they needed to file a final return and close their accounts and let us know they were closing. Um, Call after call we would make in collections. They'd say, well, I'm no longer in business. Well, they didn't let us know. Maybe they went and let their clerk know, uh, but they didn't let us know. Very important that you let us know. And on that note, if you've got TIN-TAP, you're always going to see any letters that we send you, any important correspondence. That's another good reason to have your own TIN-TAP account. Even if you have someone, a third-party accountant, CPA, filing all your taxes through TIN-TAP, and we'll show you here in a little while, that's where you can see all the letters that you send us. But you also need to make sure that you're keeping your mailing address with us updated, and you can do that on TIN-TAP as well. Update your mailing address because we do send out important information to you that that you don't want to miss. If you maybe thought you paid everything but didn't, and you just think everything's honky-dory and you're not checking your TIN-TAP mail that you got, and maybe you moved and you didn't change your address with us, you may not know that there was something wrong until you get a call from collections. And again, I hate to talk about the negative here, but these are realities, and this is the kind of stuff that can happen when you go into business. You've got a million other things you're worrying about, right? You're just trying to have a successful business, but keeping track and staying on top of all of the tax requirements and making sure you're in the know is very, very, very important. Uh, we've mentioned that if you do overpay, you can have that credit move forward to a subsequent tax period, or you can request a refund, and you can do that. It's a very easy process on TIN-TAP to request a refund. All right, so Mitch, I'm about to hand the baton back over to you to go through our resources. We've got, let's see, about 35 minutes or so left in the workshop. And this is really my favorite part is all the resources. I think that we have incredible resources on our website. They get better and better every day. And we're actually going to be sharing with you a brand new resource for new businesses that we're really excited about too. So Mitch, I'll hand things over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Awesome.
You're good.
Awesome. So, as Katie, myself, and Billy have talked about during our presentations, talking about business tax, sales tax, franchise and excise tax. We have a plethora of different resources that are available to you. And so if we were not able to, answer your question in the chat, there are a number of resources that are available to you to find the answer. And so what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of take a field trip through a lot of the different resources that are available to you specifically on our website. 10-tap is essentially the primary place where everything is done for the Tennessee Department of Revenue. And so any taxpayers that need to register for tax accounts, they do it on 10-tap. Anything that needs to be done as far as filing a tax return for any Tennessee taxes, that's done through 10-tap. Scheduling payments in advance or just making a payment in general. Making amendments to returns. Any of these functions are going to be done through 10-tap. Eventually, I'm going to share my screen with you guys, and we're kind of going to navigate some of these features on our website, and we'll go into those in a little bit more detail. Revenue help is something that we have actually used during this presentation. So if you've noticed some of the answers that have been responded to the questions that you've had, we have listed a link to a particular help desk article. Revenue help is where you can go to our website and you can do keyword searches essentially of a particular topic that you have a question about. Let's say short-term rentals is something that you're kind of unsure about. You can go to Revenue Help and you can search short-term rentals, and that can pull up any help desk articles that we have created that can inform you about that particular topic. We also have general help desk articles pertaining to 10-tap and how to navigate 10-tap. As you can see on the slide, general 10-tap how-to videos. So if you're unsure how to do certain things in 10-tap, we have a video that walks you through that process. We have general help desk articles about 10-tap, about the login process, about registration, about 10-tap payments, tax returns. And so it's a very helpful resource that you can use if you do have any questions pertaining to a very specific topic. While Billy was giving his presentation on sales tax, we had a lot of questions coming through about single article. And single article is one of those things that just confuses a lot of people. And so we have a lot of single article resources on Revenue Help that can help guide you as you're making decisions on how to administer and calculate that tax specifically. There's also a feature on 10-tap called 10-tap Assistant that you can use. If you notice on the image of the slideshow, it's this little icon right here. And when you click on that, you can submit a question. And what that'll do is that will either send you a link to whatever information that you're trying to access. It can also get you connected directly to a representative to where you can send a message directly to someone that works in the Tennessee Department of Revenue, and they'll try to respond to your question appropriately and get you the answer that you're looking for. So that's another resource that you can use. As far as the 10-tap homepage is concerned, so after you log in, after you create your 10-tap username and you log into your account, this is just an example of what it could possibly look like. Okay, so this business in particular has a business tax account. They also have a franchise and excise tax account. And if you notice, there's different tabs up at the top. There's a favorites tab, there's a summary tab, an action center tab, settings, and a more tab. There's also this house icon right here. Anytime that a taxpayer gets lost or you're unsure how to get back to where you need to go, it may be a good rule of thumb to just click on that house icon. It'll take you right back to the home page of your 10-tap, and you can go from there. There's also a Manage My Profile section. This is where you can update just important information pertaining to your 10-tap profile. Maybe you have an email address linked to the 10-tap logon and you want to change your email address. This is where you would go to do that. And so a good rule of thumb is anything that is blue, that is something that you can interact with. That is a link that you can click on and take you to wherever it is that you need to go. As you can see, we are currently on the summary tab. So the summary tab provides a summary of all of the tax accounts that business has access to in 10-tap, okay? If you do not see your tax account on here when you log in, then that means you have not gained access to your account yet, okay? And so what you'll want to do is you'll want to gain access to that account, and I'll show you exactly how to do that that specific feature is done by clicking the More tab. Then you click on the link Gain Access to an Account, and then you have to have your account information. You have to have your account number, a letter ID, things like that. But once you have that, you can gain access to that account and you can view all the activity for that particular account. If you notice, these links here, make a payment, view/file returns, and additional actions/licenses. These are all links that house all of the important tasks and features that you need to be able to utilize as a business owner and as the owner of these particular tax accounts. Action Center is also a very important tab. We actually get a lot of questions pertaining to this tab in the call center. So if you do see any notifications on the Action Center tab, that just means that there's a couple of items under that tab that just need attention. It doesn't necessarily mean you need to file anything per se or make a payment. You may, but they could just be unread letters. They could be unread messages that you haven't seen. So if you do see any notifications, I don't know about you guys, but I hate notifications. I want to knock all of them out if I can. If they start to build up, it gives me anxiety. So if you do see any notifications, be sure to just be in a good habit of checking that out and reading any messages that you may receive. And again, there may be a return or an outstanding payment that you have not fully satisfied, and that will also be under the Action Center tab as well. So don't forsake that tab and forget about it. Here is the More tab that I was talking about earlier. So for a business that needs to gain access to their account, they would click on the More tab. And if you notice right here under Manage Accounts, it's going to be the third option, Gain Access to an Account. So if you have registered for a tax account with the Department of Revenue, and when you created your TinTap username and you don't see it, that's okay. It just means you need to gain access to that account. All right. So to gain access, you would click on that More tab, click on Gain Access to an Account, and then just enter in your account number. And you would need a letter ID from a letter that you had received, and you'll be able to gain access to that account. But this tab is also extremely important. As you can see, it houses all of the submissions that you have submitted through TinTap. So if you have made any payments, you can view submissions there. If you would like to request a payment plan, as we were talking about earlier, you can do it under the More tab, under the Payments category. Additional services, there's numerous options here that you may need to navigate. Probably one of the biggest is we see a lot of LLCs or corporations that need to obtain a clearance letter. That can be done through the additional services section, and so I find myself regularly having to guide taxpayers to that section. Access, this is where you can control all of the access that you have to your accounts, or if you have someone else, maybe you have a bookkeeper that has access to your accounts, you can actually control the access of that bookkeeper to see exactly what they have access to. Or maybe you have a third-party CPA who has access to your accounts. You can control the access that they have, since they're not the primary owner of the tax account. You have the ability to control that access. You see any names and addresses that change? Sometimes, you need to change your address, or sometimes you need to change your name for whatever reason. Your business name, you can do that here as well. You can view any letters that have been submitted by the department here as well. We got a lot of taxpayers here to pull up old letters that maybe they have forgotten about, or maybe they lost. That's probably the biggest reason why we guide taxpayers to this View Letters section, is they've lost a letter and they can't find it. That's okay, because those letters are in your TinTap if you have TinTap access, and you can view those letters at any time. It's cut off here, but you can also view any submissions that you have submitted. So if you've submitted any returns, if you've submitted any payments, if you've submitted any payment plan requests, if you've submitted any claims for refund or penalty waivers, you can view all of those submissions there, and that gives you the confirmation number, the date that they were submitted, all of that important information that you need. And so this is a very important page on TinTap, and I would encourage all of you to get familiar with it if you haven't done so already. Website tour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you guys. Let's see here. View. Let's see.
Mitch, you're going to click on share.
That's right.
And do web browser.
My screen and screen 2. All right. Katie, are you able to see my my page okay?
I cannot yet. Now I can. Yep, it's there.
I can see it too, Mitch. You're good.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So as you can see, we are currently on the Tennessee Department of Revenue homepage. All right. So this is a wonderful place to start out if you're trying to access any information. I always recommend that taxpayers start out here whenever they are trying to make their way to TINTAP. As you can see, it is the very first tile that we have on our website because TINTAP is our baby. We want all taxpayers to easily navigate the TINTAP. And so the best way to navigate the TINTAP is just go to our homepage and click on this TINTAP tab. When you click on the TINTAP tab, it's going to take you directly to the page where you can log in with your username and password. We'll go ahead and go there now. And hopefully my internet is fast and it keeps up. So here is the TINTAP homepage where you would enter in your username and your password. Again, here's that feature where you can, if it's a TINTAP assistant, if you have any questions that you have, you can click on that and that'll get you connected to a representative who can assist you. But this is a great place to start out. If you want to make just a general payment without logging in, you can do that. Here's some links to, here's a link to file various returns. Here's a registration link. And so any businesses that are newly trying to register in the state of Tennessee, this is where they would go for that. Any questions or any issues navigating the approved alcohol and beer brands, we have a link specifically for that. We have a general link where just general information and inquiries can be found. And then, of course, we have an additional services tab, which can connect you to additional services as well. We're going to go back to the home page of the Tennessee Department of Revenue. One thing that we've talked about a lot during this presentation is you can actually access this information on all the different tax types on our website. And how you do that is you'll notice that you have all of these different tabs up here. All right. The one that we want to go to is we want to go to taxes. All right. And if you'll see this lovely list of all the taxes that are administered by the Tennessee Department of Revenue. Of course, we talked about business tax earlier. We talked about franchise and excise tax. We also talked about sales and use tax. All right. So let's just click on business tax. When you click on business tax, it gives you a general overview of what this tax entails. All right. It goes over due dates and tax rates. It goes over registration and licensing. It goes over the process of filing and paying. It goes over classifications that we were talking about, the class 1 through class 5. It goes over the retailer versus wholesaler information that we were talking about. It goes over deductions and exemptions and tax credits that can be reported on the business tax return. It's also a link for different forms. If for whatever reason, maybe you as a taxpayer are not tech savvy and maybe you don't have a computer, or maybe you're a CPA and you have a client who is not tech savvy and they don't want to file anything electronically, you can access the business tax return right here. Taxpayers are able to file that by paper if they're unable to do it electronically. And this is for any other tax type. So if you are navigating the sales tax page or the franchise and excise page, there's going to be a forms tab there as well that will take you to some of our paper documents. And most importantly, here, the important notices and other resources tab, this is where we house all of the important notices that the department sends out pertaining to the tax type in question. So important notices. Also, we've referenced tax manuals. Tax manuals are extremely helpful resources that you, the taxpayer, can use if you have any questions about the taxability of certain activities or the sale of certain items. If you click on that tax manual, that will take you to all of the tax guides that we have for the various tax types. So if you click on business tax and click on that link right there, it takes you directly to the business tax manual. All right. And the cool thing about that is, of course, PDFs, you can do a keyword search and take that can navigate you directly to where you need to go. So that's a very, very helpful resource. So if you have any questions about business tax, franchise excise tax, or sales tax, I strongly recommend that you explore this taxes tab and see if you can find any resources that may be helpful to you. I want to try to see another aspect of the return or of the, let's see here. Let me navigate back to WebEx. Let's see. Nope. Want to make sure. Oh, here is revenue help. And so, we've talked about revenue help desk articles in over the course of this presentation, and this is a really helpful place where you can also do keyword searches. We had some questions pertaining to single article earlier. And so if you have a question about single article, you can navigate to revenue help, search, let's say you just want to see something pertaining to single article. If you search single article, it's going to pull up all of our help desk articles that pertain to single article specifically. And so this is a very, very helpful resource as well that you can use if you have any questions pertaining to very, very specific topics. Let's see, Katie, I'm trying to navigate back to WebEx. Let me see here.
If you go back up to share.
Stop sharing. Yep.
Yep, there you go.
Perfect. So that's a little, that's sort of a tour of our website in general, the most helpful links. We actually also have a very helpful link on our website that has just been created. It's for new businesses specifically. Let me navigate back and let me share my screen again and show you what that link is specifically. So on our homepage, we have a new business landing page, and it's this tile right here, new business information. When you click on it, any businesses that are starting in the state of Tennessee, we know that it can be a very stressful process. And, you know, the most important thing is taxpayers generally just want to know that they're doing everything in the correct way and they're abiding by all of the laws to the best of their ability. This page is a wonderful place that houses a lot of really cool resources that you can use when establishing your business in Tennessee. If you notice right here for new businesses, let's get started. We have a step-by-step process that you can follow as the business owner. And this just helps provide assurance that you're doing everything that you're supposed to be doing when setting up your account or your accounts for the Tennessee Department of Revenue. For example, step 1, setting up a business. If you click on that, it provides a really awesome and thorough checklist that you can follow to make sure that you're doing everything in the way that you're supposed to be doing it. And so if you are a business owner that is thinking about starting a business in the state of Tennessee, I highly recommend you to navigate to this page. If you're a CPA or an accountant who has many clients in the future, I'm sure that you come across many questions from businesses that are just trying to do the right thing when they first start. I would recommend that you navigate them directly to this portion of our website, and this can be something that can help provide assurance to them that they are doing everything that they're supposed to be doing. So this is a really, really cool resource. We're very excited about it. It's brand new, and we're going to continue to make improvements to it as time goes. So let's see. I'm going to go back to our PowerPoint. We also have a couple of links to just some miscellaneous help that you can access as a new business. So one is the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development. This website is essentially just a guide. It's an online tool that helps you visualize your business model and connects you with resources across the state on how to maybe register your business. Maybe can get you connected with a mentor who has been in that particular business prior. And so this is a really, really good resource that you can utilize. Another one is the Tennessee Small Business Development Center. And so essentially what this is it's a network of centers that provide counseling and training to help small business owners start, grow, and expand their business. And so again, it's just another resource that we want to try to educate taxpayers on that they can use to ensure that they feel like they're doing everything that they're supposed to be doing when starting their business. Another one is the Score Association. And so this website connects you with volunteer business counselors that specialize in particular fields, maybe advisors or mentors, and they offer individual free to low-cost counseling throughout the US and its territories. And so they have a couple of different workshops that they also provide as well. One particular topic is the startup roadmap or the simple steps for exiting your business. And so two very important aspects when doing business is starting the business and closing the business. They provide some workshops pertaining to these topics specifically. And then also, we have the Small Business Administration. The Small Business Administration, what it does is it connects you to funding pathways that can help you fund your business. They have business guides, funding programs, federal contracting, learning platforms, and they can also get you linked up with local assistance in the area where your business is domiciled. And so this is another very helpful resource that you can utilize as a new business owner. Also, we have social media. Social media is a very powerful tool that we try to use to convey information to taxpayers. So if you are on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, then hey, give us a follow. We post updates of important information there quite frequently, and we have a very good communications team that tries to keep taxpayers up to date with all relevant information. In general, here's just some basic information. Here's the link to our website, tn.gov/revenue. We also have revenue.support@tn.gov. This is a place where you can actually submit a help desk ticket to our help desk team, and what they do is they provide responses to questions that may pertain to tax liability questions or maybe taxability questions or really anything under the sun pertaining to Tennessee Department of Revenue, and they will get written responses to you. And then, of course, we also have our general call center. It's open Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30 Central Standard Time, and that's the phone number that you can call. I think that concludes the resources. Katie, do you want to take over? Maybe I missed anything pertaining to resources that you'd like to cover or reiterate?
I think you took care of it all. Great, Mitch. Just really want to stress sending you all to those resources to answer any questions if you want more information about anything we talked about today, or again, like we've said, if there are some tax types that pertain to your business that that we didn't go over today, go to that taxes page, revenue help. Again, very excited about our new business landing page. That literally it just launched last week, so it is brand new. And we hope that, again, if you're a new business, you can reference that to just, again, to make sure you've dotted all your I's and crossed all your T's. Any accountants or CPAs that are on here, like Mitch said, please forward that information to your clients, because knowledge is power, right? Understanding all this, it's a massive topic. And again, if you're a business owner, unless you're a CPA or an accountant, taxes may not be your thing. And we want to take as much guesswork out of that as possible. Just contacting us, using these resources, checking out our webinars. As we've mentioned several times, the upcoming webinar that we've got is on single article. Next month in November, the last Tuesday of the month, is going to be e-commerce and online selling. That is something that I think affects a lot of business owners. I saw some chat questions regarding that. So again, it's the last Tuesday of every month, and it's a free webinar. You do have to register for it really quickly, just like you did for this one. Just name, email, then you'd get an email from us to log into that webinar. But please check that out as well. Let's see, Billy, do you have anything else to add?
No, not really. I was just going to thank everybody for participating today. We had a lot of great questions in the chat, questions that were very pertinent to what we were talking about. So we know you guys were paying great attention, and we appreciate that a whole lot. And I want to personally thank you, Katie, and you, Mitch, as well, Stephanie and Dan also for helping out today. I think it went very well. And just want to remind everybody that, we do have ways for you to get answers to your questions. I think I put the phone number in for our call center, you know, at 615-253-0600. And Mitch and his bunch, as well as others, are responsible for offering that great phone service. And we do answer the phone, y'all. If you call, you're going to get an answer from 8 to 4:30 very quickly. And we're very proud of that too. And then, of course, we do have the revenue.support@tn.gov for the email service as well. Just want you to reach out to us anytime you have questions. Don't be in the dark. You know, be on top of stuff like you were today in attending today's presentation. So that's really what I wanted to say, Katie. Thank you.
Unless it's tax return due date, then you can get a human being on the phone on Mitch's team very quickly. And we put a lot of focus on customer service and wanting to help you. We're not just saying that, we really do. So calling us, reaching out to that email address, that's part of Dan's team, the crew that helps respond to those. We will get back to you and help you best we can. We will work with you and help you figure out all this stuff. Thanks so much for joining us today. I commend you for taking the initiative to be here. We had about 150 people attend, and that's awesome. We used to do this event live before COVID times, but just this year we started presenting this new business workshop virtually. We'll do another one in a few months. Just be on the lookout for our website. If you have any friends or know people that are thinking about getting into business or have just started business, please refer them over to joining one of these events in the future. And as you exit, let me just fast forward here. Yep, we've got no more slides. As you're exiting, you will get a quick survey. We would really love it if you could just answer those questions to provide us with feedback on what you thought about today's workshop. So again, thanks so much for joining us, and we will hopefully see you soon at a future virtual event that we've got.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
you, everyone.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great day. Bye.